Hey, it's Josh. Today I wanted to spend some time doing solving of proportions, but more with like an Algebra 1 kind of spin to it, okay? Let's start off with this top guy here and just jump right into this stuff. I'm all about being practical, right? This is called practical math, efficient math, getting the job done, all right? With all these problems, I'm going to go old school and cross multiply. It's the way I like to see these things done. It's easy, it's very visual, but if you have your own method, then go for it, okay? So I'm going to cross multiply and I get 5x equals 6. And then from there, I just divide both sides by 5, isolate the variable, x equals 6 over 5. Could I make it 1 1/5? Of course I could. But at that point, like if you're doing this kind of work and getting this is your answer, again, this is where it gets back to like, what are you using this for? Is this to find a rate of change, a ratio between two things? What do you need this to do? If you need to write it as a fraction or a mixed number, I'm sorry, then convert it. But this is the real work here. Changing that, okay, yeah, it takes a little bit of skill, but that shouldn't be the focus of the problem. So I know I went kind of quick, but this was almost like a review problem. Okay, now we're going to kind of step it up to the next one here. As always, maybe pause the video, try a couple of these, see what you get. You saw what I did for the first one. I'm just going to be doing the same method all the way through all of these. So maybe try one of them, see what you get. Then then play the video and see if what you're doing is correct. I really do think you learn a lot by practicing, making the mistakes, and then going back and rewatching this stuff. Okay, let's do our usual cross multiply. I always draw that out just because, again, it reminds me what to match with what. As the problems get more complicated, I like having visuals in my work because I think that it's easy to follow what I'm trying to do. I got this times this. Now, I could probably do that in my head, but I'm going to write it out. Okay, so 6 times x plus 4 equals negative 5 times 2x. And maybe you're saying, Josh, dude, I know how to do 6 times x, like that's easy. So I'm just going to skip this step. Okay, that's fine. And I say that that's okay, but at the same time, don't make mistakes right there, all right? I always tell students, this is where people make small mistakes because they're going so fast and they're keeping all this in their head. Sometimes it's worth it to just write it out one extra time. 6x plus 24 equals negative 10x. All right, this type of a problem, what is our goal? X is on one side, numbers on the other, right? Isolate the variable and then work from there. So I guess I'll just subtract 6x, okay? I try not to work with negatives, but if I move this guy over and leave a 0 over here, now I got to subtract this guy over and then I'm doing extra work. It's like just if I can move this guy over and have a number on this side, then so be it. Negative 10x's minus another 6x's is negative 16x's. And now we just isolate the variable even more, or I'm sorry, get it down to 1 unit of x by dividing by negative 16. What you do to one side, you do to the other. We read our fraction down. 24 divided by negative 16 is, well, I'll save you the grief of looking through that. It's negative 1 1/2. Okay. I guess like technically it's a mixed number, improper fraction, and then you can reduce it. But you know, you could cut these in half. You could do, what's that? 12 over 8, and then cut it down to 6 over 4, and then you could do 3 over 2. Okay, it's a negative. Sorry, I guess I should put the negative sign in there. So it's either negative 3 over 2 or negative 1 1/2. Okay. Either answer would be okay. Sometimes if you just half it, and keep cutting it in half and come up with that answer, that's probably good enough. Okay. Again, if you're seeing what I'm doing, pause the video. It's important that you try some of this stuff. I don't like this being edutainment. I always say that in class. Like, I don't want you just sitting back eating some Cheetos. One, because you can't share, and I might want some, but also just because then you're just like kind of kicking back and watching the show. By being more interactive with this video, you're actually going to take a lot more away from this lesson. All right, so that's my little public service announcement for the minute. Okay, same thing as always, cross multiply. This one is going to be an x times x minus 3. And then I have an 18 times 3, which, oh, well, that's a big number. I'll just use a calculator, right? You should be able to use one in your algebra class, so I'm going to use one now. 54. So I'll just say equals 54. And I use my rainbow. I'll distribute. X times x is x squared. And then I have minus 3x. Okay. This guy's a little bit tricky, right? What can I do here? If I pull the x back out, I'm going to end up with this, and I'm just kind of going around in this crazy circle because I'm not actually doing anything. All I'm ending up with is just another problem that equals 54. I'm not really solving this thing and coming up with a final solution. You gotta move on and move everything to one side and then start working with this guy as a trinomial. So let's subtract 54 from this side and subtract 54 from this side, and that's going to give us a 0. So we have x squared minus 3x minus 54 equals 0. Okay? And now you got to start working with the 54. Yeah, it's a big number. So, you know, now you need to start figuring out, well, you know you have 54 and 1. Let's see here, 54. Let's see here. What could work on that? Yeah, I was just kind of dividing it through just to see what I get. And it looks like the easiest one, because I was trying to like cut it in half, but that won't work for the middle guy. You could do 9 and 6, and that's going to give you a 3. Okay? So even though it doesn't come to you right away, you got a calculator. And so maybe take the 54 and just start dividing it like I was, just start dividing it by all these numbers. Which again gets back to, I don't know, I guess another little thing to talk about. You know, when I make these problems, I usually try not to go through them before I actually present them to you guys. And that's just because I feel like if I do that, it kind of takes away some of the extra little things that I might think of along the way. Versus if I do it now, kind of like live, I feel like I'm going to give you a little bit more of a, I didn't realize that, and a couple little bit more things that I can share with you. It's not as scripted, I guess I could say. All right, let's get back to the work because I'm talking too much. Let's factor this guy. This is going to be minus and minus, so I'm going to have a plus and a minus. Right? Because a negative times positive is going to give me a negative. And this is going to be a positive 6 and a negative 9. Okay? Equals 0. Now this is getting back to that ZPP, the zero product property. What numbers could I plug in here to make these equal to 0? Well, I could plug in right here. What could I plug into this binomial to make this first part a 0? Right, negative 6. What could I plug in here to make this guy equal to 0? A positive 9. Don't put parentheses around them, because if you do this, now they look like ordered pairs, okay? So if you need to answer this on a test or something, I would recommend just writing it as x equals, and then, oh, that's a giant negative sign. That's okay. You know, I would just write it like that. X equals negative 6, comma, 9. Now, there's something that's going to be said in this type of problem, which is going to be check for extraneous solutions, right? Those are the types of solutions where you get these answers here, but then when you go and plug them into this original problem, they don't work, and it's frustrating, okay? Now, not so much, it's not really going to happen that often in these types of problems, but as you start getting into more of like the quadratic equations and stuff, you might get like 3 different answers over here. And if that's the case, then it's possible that one of them might not work or just not have a solution. So you are recommended to try all of them, okay? So with these types of problems, if it says solve, then I'm going to assume that there is just answers, okay? Sometimes it'll say solve and check for extraneous solutions, E-X-T-R-A-N-E, extraneous solutions, okay? Now you're dealing with a possibility of an answer not actually working in your equation. Okay, and so that it does happen. It's E-O-U-S, E-O-U-S. Let me change that. I don't want to tell you guys how to spell something wrong. Okay, there's an O that goes right in there. Extraneous. Okay, but then again, as you get farther into Algebra 1, even into Algebra 2, it's possible that problem's just going to say solve. Okay, they're not going to give you hints like, oh, don't forget, one of them might be extraneous. They're not going to do that for you anymore because they're assuming that you, the mathematician, are actually checking your own work and not just cranking through all this stuff and then saying, oh, whew, finish that one. I'm not going to check these answers. I'm just going to assume all of them work. All right, let's see here. We got -2 over x minus 7 equals x over 5. Same system, here we go. -2 times 5 is -10, and this guy is x times x minus 7, which is x squared minus 7x equals -10. Again, let's move this guy over, make it a trinomial. So I'm going to add 10 and add 10, and so this side becomes a 0. Usually I kind of rate that a little bit higher on an angle just to kind of show like I'm doing it to both sides, okay? That's just my personal way of doing it. 0 equals x squared minus 7x plus 10. What makes a 10? A 5 and a 2, a 10 and a 1. Do any of these so far make a 7? Yes, 5 and 2 will make a 7. So let's do this part, equals 0. Using the zero product property, I'm going to factor my trinomial. I'm going to get a, let's see here, x minus 5, x minus 2, because a negative times a negative is positive, and when I add the two parts, you know, when I FOIL it, I'm going to get a -7 in the middle. Again, if I'm going too fast through those rules, go back and check out my FOIL, you know, multiplying binomials and working with trinomials, zero product property. These are all things that are like all coming together in these types of problems. So spend some time and go back over those, because once you get to this, they're not going to walk you through those little extra steps and say, remember when you did this? Remember when you learned this? They're just kind of assuming that you know all that now. It's all in your brain, and now it's a matter of applying it. Using the zero product property, what's going to give me these numbers or these values? Let's see here. What minus 5 gives me a 0? A 5. What gives me a -2? I'm sorry, a 0 with this guy? A 2. So we could just say x equals 5, 2, and we're all set. Again, you would check them in here, make sure these fractions equal each other and everything else, which they do in this situation. But once you've done that, then you're done. All right, last one of this lesson. And again, I tried to pick ones that I guess just got a little bit more complicated along the way, but you can only do so much to these guys. 6x plus 1 equals 2x over 1. Okay, this one I felt like was kind of weird as I started to write it out, just because it's like, it's over 1, so why not give me a real fraction, like put it over a 3 or a 7 or something? But that's what this book chose to do, is just put it over 1. Probably just because you're practicing. You know, you're not really like solving major equations, you're just kind of learning the basics of this stuff. 2 times 1 is 2, and then I have 2x times 6x plus 1, which is going to give me a, what's that? Oops, made a mistake there. let me erase that. Got 6's on the brain. 2 equals 12x squared plus 2x. Again, let's zero this guy out. Minus 2, minus 2. So 0 equals 12x squared plus 2x minus 2. Okay, can I factor anything out of this trinomial? I can, so maybe let's try that. Let's try and pull a 2 out of all 3 of these guys, right? These rules keep coming on back. Let's see, if I pull out a 2, what happens? I get a 6x squared plus x minus 1. I guess, I mean, I'm looking for some values, so I'm assuming I can factor this guy here. So let's see. The 6 is going to be here, maybe I can just kind of squeeze it in right there. I can do a 2 and a 3, or a 6 and a 1. A 1 is just going to be a 1 and a 1. So I really don't have much to work with, but I need a positive 1 in the middle. So I'm going to go with 2 and 3. So I have a 2, and then I have a 2x and a 3x, and it's a minus in the back. So it's a plus and a minus, and it's a positive. So it's plus 1 minus 1. Okay? So I have 2 times 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 1 equals 0. Right? Okay. And now I need to figure out this guy. I have 2x plus 1. What number would go right there? What value? Okay. It's always weird to explain this, and so the best way I've always thought of it is, you know what you do? You take the number that's in front of it and you make it into a fraction with that. Okay, because that's going to turn it into a 1. Now I want this to become a 0. So this fraction here would be 2 times, like I said, use the number on the bottom, put it over 1, and you're going to make it negative. Let's see, I'll do that, plus 1 equals 0. Okay, because then when I multiply these, I'm going to get a negative 2 over a 2, which is a negative 1. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. And then I'm all set. I know I'm going kind of quick through some of these parts, but again, these are the kind of things that you should just know. And so as I'm talking through it, I'm hoping that it's just giving you a quick little refresher. Okay, so in order to figure out the fraction that goes next to it, usually the quickest way is just to use the number that you were given, put it over 1, under 1, and then make it negative or positive if you need to. For this guy, it's 3x minus 1 equals 0. So I need this guy to be a positive amount. So I do the same thing. 3, which is this guy right here, times 1 over 3 minus 1 equals 0. Because this is going to give me 3/3, which is 1 whole. 1 minus 1 is going to equal 0. So my answers are this guy and this guy. Okay? So x equals negative 1/2 and positive 1/3. That one was a little bit trickier because once you got to this trinomial, you had to decide to factor it as well. Okay? So, hope this is starting to make sense. These do get a little tricky, so take your time. Remember the rules of algebra, and you should be all set. Thanks for watching.